Welcome to LifePoint TV. I'm Pastor Dale Phillips. I'm your host here on LifePoint, your path to real life. Uh, we have embarked on a real interesting series dealing with the word or the concept of grace. Grace, as I've said in our previous programs, grace isolates God's work, separating what God does from what you and I do. It is highlighting the work of God versus the work of man, and allows us to understand God's work is not limited nor is it hindered by our abilities or the lack thereof. God uh, works through His grace. And that word grace is very important. I want to refresh our definition from the Hebraic. From the Hebraic, we have the word kain or Cain. Khane is the would be the spelling in the English. And the word grace in its Hebraic root, uh, it typifies or illustrates a superior bending over, stooping down to give or bring kindness to one that is inferior. So it is an illustration of one that is higher, reaching down to minister kindness to those that are lower. As a matter of fact, truthfully spoken, only a person or only an entity that is greater can really administer grace. Oh, I like this. So the very fact that we are receiving grace, it also indicates that there is one who is greater than we are. The fact that we are the recipients of grace, it not only suggests, but it clarifies that we are weaker, lesser than the one that we are receiving grace from. So, ooh, I like this. It helps us to understand the significance, the necessity of grace. We are saved. Paul teaches us we are saved by grace through faith. Watch this. Watch this. Verse 8. We are saved by grace through faith, not of yourselves. And I got to underline that. You and I, we make no contribution to our salvation. Grace saves us, irregardless of what we are able to contribute. Grace acknowledges that we are weaker and God is greater. And so, if we are saved by grace through our faith, our confidence in God, we go all the way back to our original premise in Romans chapter 5, verse 1, that we now have peace with God because we have been given access to God's grace, wherein we stand. So stay in that place of grace. If you're standing in grace, if God has brought us into His presence by grace, then stay there. Stay in that place of grace. Don't wrestle with trying to move out and to stand on your own. Now, this brings us to an interesting point of reference in 2 Corinthians. I want you to go there with me. 2 Corinthians chapter 12. The author of this concept of grace shows us a personal snapshot of what happens when we wrestle with our stance, our position. 2 Corinthians chapter 12. I want you to find verse 9. Take a look at this. I like this. I like this. This is a reference, a reflection of Paul's personal testimony. Verse 9 says, and he said unto me, this is the conclusion of his testimony, and he said unto me, my grace is sufficient for thee. My strength is made perfect in weakness. For those who are familiar with this passage, as Paul is sharing with the church of Corinth, a personal snapshot of his wrestling with his inabilities, with his inferiority, with his weakness. He says that as he was struggling, wrestling with a thorn that was in his flesh. Note. It says the thorn was in his flesh, not in his spirit. That's another teaching, but I want to make reference to that. The thorn, the imperfection, that disturbance, the thorn representing, are actually in its correct definition, explaining the area where he was agitated. Buffeted is the term that's used in Scripture. He was the thorn agitated him. The agitation was in his flesh, not in his spirit. And he says, God, I need you to remove this thorn that agitates me, that buffets me, that causes and creates a conflict within me. And the conclusion of the matter is God speaking to him, my grace, ooh, there's that word, my ability as your senior, as your superior, to bend over, to stoop down, and to give you kindness, to give you favor, to give you what you need. My grace is sufficient for thee. Paul can define and teach on grace because he recognizes he is a recipient. He also finds himself living by grace. Grace is not a one-time experience. Our salvation moment defines the rest of our life. We don't get saved by grace through faith and then we get to graduate and go out and be on our own. No, you stay in that position, that place of grace. Always, listen to me, always needing God, our superior, to bend over, stoop down to us because we are inferior, lesser than him. I need him, man, not on Sundays, not on Salvation Day. I need him every day because where I'm weak, he is strong. Ooh, I like this. This is Pastor Dale Phillips encouraging you. Stay on the path, that grace path that leads to real life.